Picture a street so narrow that the buildings on either side nearly touch overhead. Their upper floors leaning toward each other like old men whispering secrets they don't want the ground to hear. Now fill it with 37 families. Add a single water tap shared between all of them that runs, when it runs at all, for maybe 40 minutes each morning. Add a privy in the courtyard, a wooden shed over a pit, shared between all 37 families, the door hanging half off its hinges. The smell, something that reaches you before you even round the corner from the main road. Add children sleeping 4 to a bed in rooms the size of a modern bathroom, their breath steaming in winter, their bodies slick with heat in summer, and the walls always damp, always running with moisture that smells of rot and old plaster, and something beneath both of those that you don't have a word for yet but will come to understand, in time, is the smell of sustained human desperation. That's a court in Victorian London, not a courtyard in any garden party sense, a court. A dead-end passage carved out of the body of the city like a bad tooth socket. A place so removed from the main streets that the people who pass by on those main streets, 20 feet away, don't know it exists, don't want to know it exists. We're going back there tonight, not as visitors, not as charity workers in good boots making notes in clean ledgers. We're living it. One childhood, years of it. Everything a child born at the absolute bottom of the Victorian world would have seen, smelled, tasted, and survived. So I make these history stories, and I genuinely do not know whether you're listening to this to fall asleep or because you've developed some specific fascination with the texture of Victorian destitution. Honestly, both are valid. Both are completely fine. Whatever gets you through the night. Subscribe if you want to keep hearing about the parts of history that the textbooks mention in 2 sentences and then move on from. Get comfortable. Put the blanket up. Here we go. You're 9 years old and you're already late. Not late the way a modern child is late for school, where someone notices, and the worst consequence is a mark in a register. Late the way it matters when lateness has a cost you can feel in your stomach. The matchbox quota was supposed to be done before your mother woke up. That was the agreement, the silent understanding, the arrangement that nobody spoke aloud because speaking it aloud would have made it too real, too precise, too much like what it actually was, which was a 9-year-old child working through the small hours of the morning while the court outside slept its uneasy sleep. But your fingers are cramped, have been cramped since about 2 in the morning. The cold does that. The single room where you live, where all 5 of you live, where everything you own exists within 14 feet by 10 feet of damp plaster and bare floorboard, does not hold heat the way rooms with furniture hold heat. The fireplace at the far end has not had coal in it since Tuesday, and this is Friday. The blankets on the bed, such as they are, 2 thin ones and a piece of sacking that someone gave your mother when she worked at the laundry, before the cough got too bad for the laundry to keep her on, those blankets are on the bed where your mother and your 2 small sisters are sleeping in a knot of shared warmth. You are at the table with the matchboxes. The matchboxes. Let me tell you about the matchboxes, because this is the engine of your entire existence right now, and you need to understand what they ask of you before you understand anything else. A matchbox is a simple object. You've seen them all your life. A small cardboard tray, a cardboard sleeve that slides over it, the rough strip of sandpaper pasted along one side. You could describe one in 10 words. Making them is different. The paper sheets come in a bundle, already cut. Your job is to fold them, score the fold lines with your thumbnail, crease them sharp, touch a brush loaded with cold flour paste to the edges, press them together, Hold them while they dry, then do it again. Over and over. 12 times an hour if you're quick. Less if your fingers are cold and stiff, and your nail is split where you've been using it as a scoring tool since October. The pay is 2 shillings and 3 pence per gross. A gross is 144 boxes. You need to produce 3 gross a week. You and your mother working together when she's well enough. Just you when she isn't to cover the rent. The rent is 4 shillings and 6 pence a week. The rent is always 4 shillings and 6 pence a week. The rent is the fixed point around which everything else in your universe orbits. The rent is the sun, and you are a very small planet with a very unstable orbit. Right now it's not quite light, and you've done 81 boxes tonight, and your thumbnail hurts, and the flour paste has dried on the brush again because you fell asleep for a few minutes around midnight and didn't notice the paste setting up. And you had to spend 20 minutes working it free with a corner of the table and a cup of water from the jug on the floor. Except there wasn't much water in the jug, and now there isn't any, and your mouth is very dry, and there is no tea, and there will not be tea until you've done more boxes. You are 9 years old. You are not unhappy. That sounds strange to say, sitting here in this future, in this clean place with warmth and comfort around you, and the easy knowledge that tomorrow is not a crisis. But you're not unhappy. You don't have the contrast yet. You don't know that children in other parts of this same city are sleeping until 7 in warm beds and eating eggs and toast for breakfast, and going to school in shoes without holes. You know your world. Your world is the boxes and the cold and the court outside and your mother's cough. And within that world there are good mornings and bad mornings, and this is somewhere in the middle. You pick up the brush and start again. Fold, score, fold, paste edge, press, hold. The candle on the table is down to about an inch. You've been watching it for an hour, judging the rate, calculating whether it will last until dawn, because when it goes out you'll be working by feel alone, and that slows everything down, and the paste goes in the wrong places, and the boxes come out crooked, and the middleman at the warehouse in Bethnal Green Road, the man with the grey moustache and the coat that smells of turpentine, he rejects crooked boxes. He rejects them and does not pay for them, and looks at you in a way that makes your neck feel hot when he does it. Outside the court, someone is moving. You can hear footsteps on the paving stones, slow and deliberate. Someone who knows the route by feel in the dark. That'll be old Mrs. Skerritt from the room above going to the privy. Mrs. Skerritt goes at 4 most mornings. You know this. You know the sound of most of the court by now. The baby in number 7 that cries between 2 and 3. The man in number 12 who coughs differently from your mother, a wet, heavy cough that makes the walls feel closer. The dogs that root through whatever gets thrown in the passage after 9 o'clock. The scrape of their paws on stone and the crack when they find something worth fighting over. You know all of this the way you know the creases in your own hands. The candle spits and steadies. Fold, score, fold, paste, press, hold. Your name is Thomas Briggs, and everyone calls you Tommy. And you have lived in this court in Whitechapel for 14 months, since your father died at the tallow factory in Stepney, where a vat of boiling fat tipped over and 3 men died on a Wednesday afternoon in October, and nobody was charged with anything, and the factory was running again by the following Monday. You came from Liverpool before that, from a room in the Vauxhall Road not very different from this one. But Liverpool is so far away now in your memory that it might as well be a story someone told you about someone else. You remember a brown dog, A staircase with a broken third step. Your father's voice. That's most of it. Your mother, Sarah Briggs, née Crawford, is 31 years old, which is old for a woman who has lived the way she's lived, and the cough has been getting worse since January, and the dispensary doctor, a thin, sharp-faced man named Sims who works out of a room in Commercial Street 3 days a week, told her in March that she needed rest and fresh air and good food, and she looked at him for a moment and then asked if he was going to supply any of those things himself, and he looked at the floor and wrote something in a small book and gave her a bottle of Linctus that helps a little. The cough doesn't wake the girls now. They've learned to sleep through it. Adaptation. Children adapt to things that would destroy adults. Not because children are stronger, but because children don't know yet that they're not supposed to be able to adapt. Your sisters are Nell, who is 6, and Ada, who is 3. Ada doesn't understand yet. She understands hunger and cold and warmth and her mother's smell and your face, and that's most of what she needs. Nell understands more. Nell has started to help with the boxes when she's not at school. Her small fingers doing the folding while you do the pasting, working together at the table in the afternoons, not talking much, concentrating. And sometimes you catch Nell looking at you with an expression you don't have words for, which is probably love, but also something older than love, a kind of reckoning, a child doing the arithmetic of a situation and finding the numbers acceptable because you are in them. You don't think about this much. It would use up energy you don't have. 86 boxes. The court begins to wake around 5:30. You hear it before you see it, through the one small window that faces the yard, doors opening, the metallic clang of someone getting the water going at the tap being stiff and needing a particular technique, a kind of wrestling hold that the newer people in the court haven't learned yet. A baby starting up. The particular sound of a man putting his boots on. The leather creak and the stamp and the second stamp testing weight on both feet. The light through the window is the grey of old pewter. That flat pre-dawn grey that doesn't really illuminate anything but makes shapes distinguishable from shadows. You can see the table now without the candle, which is good, because the candle just died, a brief blue flame and then nothing, and the smell of tallow smoke mixing with everything else the room already smells of. You put the last completed box on the stack, count them. 93, not enough. You needed 120 tonnite to stay on track. You flex your hands and the cramps run from your wrists to your fingertips like something alive, like something with a personality. You press your palms flat on the table and push against them, and the joints crack in a series knuckle by knuckle, and the pain is both worse and better for that. Your mother stirs on the bed. You don't move. She settles again. The cough comes 2 or 3 times, suppressed, contained. She's learned to muffle it in the blanket. Whether out of courtesy for the girls or because the sound of it frightens her now, you're not sure. Maybe both. You stand up very quietly and go to the corner where the water jug is and tip it and get nothing. Completely dry. You lick your lips, which doesn't help, and decide to go to the tap. The tap runs beginning around 5, that's the accepted time. Not before, because the people in the rooms facing the court from the north side, whose windows look directly onto it, will shout at you if you start the tap before 5 and the noise wakes their children. You go by the court's time. You live on the court's schedule. You take the jug and open the door. The cold comes in like something physical, like a hand pressing flat against your face. It's March, and it doesn't feel like March yet. Not in the mornings, not in the courts that don't get sun until after 10, when the angle changes and the light comes down between the buildings for a little while, like something visiting. You're wearing your day clothes still. You slept in them last night too. It makes no sense to undress. It only makes you colder. You take them off for washing and you wait for them to dry and you put them back on. That's the cycle. The court in the grey morning looks like something a tired person drew from memory. The paving stones are dark with moisture, a sheen of wet on everything. The privies at the far end are closed, but someone's been sick near them in the night. You can see it and smell it both. The wall on the west side has a crack running from the roof to about halfway down that widens every winter, and the landlord, a man named Catchpole who runs his properties from an office in Aldgate and comes here once a month for the rent, has been promising to fix it for 2 years. It has not been fixed. The crack is now wide enough to see through, and in very cold weather water seeps through it and runs down the interior wall of number 3, where the Price family lives, a Welsh family, 4 of them in one room like everyone else. The father doing dock work when the dock work is there. The mother taking in washing, which she does in a wooden tub in the court itself on dry days, her red hands wringing sheets into a grey rope. Mrs. Price is already at the tap when you get there. She doesn't look up. She fills her own bucket with the efficient economy of someone who does this every day without thinking about it. The water here is from the mains, connected in 1873 according to the board nailed beside the tap, which was a significant improvement over the pump that used to serve the court, and that, before the improvement, shared its water table with everything the privy pits were putting into the ground. The doctor at the dispensary explained this once. The mechanism of contamination, the way cholera moved through water and not through air, the way people used to believe. He explained it carefully and completely. The people in the court nodded, and then went home and did whatever they had always done, because understanding how something kills you does not always help you avoid being killed by it when the alternative is going thirsty. You fill the jug. The water is cold enough to make your fingers ache at the contact. You hold the jug under the tap longer than you need to, feeling the cold run through your palms, because the cold is at least different from the cramp, at least a change, and sometimes a change is better than nothing. Mrs. Price gives you a brief look, not unkind. In the court, most of the looks are not unkind. You're all in the same situation or close enough to it that unkindness is a luxury nobody can afford. There is a kind of rough solidarity in courts like this, which the people who write about them from the outside often miss because they are looking at the poverty and not at the people in the poverty. The people in the poverty know each other's names and schedules and troubles with a precision that people in comfortable houses know about almost no one. "Your ma sleeping?" Mrs. Price says. "Yes." She nods, finishes with her bucket, shakes her hands dry. "I've got a bit of oatmeal left from yesterday. Come round after 7 if you want it." You thank her, and she goes back inside, and you carry the jug back to your room. Your mother is awake now. She's sitting up on the bed, the blanket around her shoulders, her hair loose, which you don't see often, and she looks younger this way, without the hair pulled back, and simultaneously much older. The way the bad light in the room finds the hollows in her face and makes them deeper. "How many?" she says. 93. She closes her eyes briefly, does the arithmetic, opens them. "I'll do the morning session. You take Nell to school first. I can stay and help with the boxes. Nell knows the way. She's 6, Tommy. She can't go alone." She can, actually. Nell knows the way. Nell has been walking to school alone since she was 5.5, because in Whitechapel in 1881 you learn the route, and you learn it young, and then you walk it. But your mother means something else by this. Means that she wants Nell walked, wants the ritual, wants that small proof of ordinary childhood to persist even here, even now. All right, you say. I'll come back after and do boxes until the afternoon. Your mother looks at you. There's something in her eyes that you have learned to read without wanting to. A complicated mixture of gratitude and grief, and the particular shame of a woman who knows that her child is carrying more than a child should carry. You have seen this look enough times that it has stopped being a look and has started being a fact, like the crack in the wall or the coldness of the water, just a feature of the world as it is. She says nothing, pulls the blanket tighter. You fill the cracked cup from the jug and put it near her on the floor where she can reach it, and you go to wake Nell. Nell wakes up fast, the way children who have learned to be useful wake up. A single blink and she's present, fully there, no wandering back towards sleep. Ada mumbles and buries herself in your mother's warmth, and your mother makes a small sound, a hushing sound, and Ada goes still again. You and Nell eat standing up. There's half a loaf of bread from yesterday, gone hard overnight, and you hold your piece of it against the side of the water jug for a moment, pressing the bread against the cold ceramic, which doesn't do much but is something, and then you eat it in small bites because eating it slowly makes it feel like more. Nell eats hers without ceremony, watching you, watching the door. Is it cold out? She says. Yes. My shoes have a hole. I know. Put your feet down flat and stay out of the puddles. There are always puddles. Then walk on the edges. She considers this with the seriousness that Nell brings to most things. The edges have more horse stuff on them. Then walk in the middle. You just said, walk wherever you want, Nell. Just keep the wet out. She nods, satisfied with this resolution, and picks up her cap from the floor where she dropped it last night. The school is on Hanbury Street, a board school built in 1877, a large brick building that, when you first saw it, seemed impossible, seemed like a building that could not exist in the same neighbourhood as the court, a building with high ceilings and proper windows and a clock face above the entrance, and a playground with actual flagstones. The School Board for London, established 11 years ago, has been building these places all over the East End, stuffing children into education, with the focused urgency of people who've decided that the alternative, children running loose in the streets eating refuse and learning to pick pockets, is more expensive in the long run. The schools are free. This matters enormously. This is the difference between Nell learning to read and Nell not learning to read, and your mother believes in learning to read with a ferocity that embarrasses its own intensity. A woman who reads when she has anything to read, who borrows penny papers from Mrs. Skerritt and reads them twice, who told you once that the most important thing you could take from any situation was what you learned in it. You believe this because she believes it, the way children believe the things their parents hold most urgently. The walk to Hanbury Street takes 12 minutes if you go straight and longer if you go through the market, which on Thursday mornings has stalls selling everything from second-hand boots to eels in vinegar to bolts of cloth to small desperate animals in crates, rabbits mostly. The kind of animal you look at and understand has a very limited number of days remaining. You go through the market. It's not a decision exactly. It's just that the market route takes you past the baker's shop on the corner of Commercial Street. And the baker's shop at this hour has its door open, and the warm air that comes out of it when the door is open reaches approximately 15 feet down the pavement, and those 15 feet are 15 feet of warmth and the smell of bread actually baking, not bread that has been baked and gone hard, but bread at the moment of becoming bread. That yeasty brown smell, that is the most honest smell in the world. You walk through it. You walk through it slowly, timing your pace to get the maximum time inside the warm air. Nell does the same without being told. She reaches up and takes your hand as you pass the doorway, and you walk through the warm air together, her hand in yours. Neither of you says anything about it. After the baker's, the cold feels different. More specifically cold, if that makes sense. The comparison activates it. The market at 7 in the morning is in full operation. The costermongers with their barrows laid out, the women in shawls, the men in flat caps and aprons. The smells layer over each other in a way that has a physical quality. You could almost push against them. The sharp ammonia of fish from the herring stall at the entrance. Then the hot grease from the man selling fried fish in a cone of newspaper. Then the raw smell of the butcher's offal displayed on a tray. Tripe and kidneys and lights. The parts of animals that cost least because they take the most work to make edible. The parts that the court buys when it has money and does without when it doesn't. Nell's hand tightens in yours at the offal. She doesn't like the look of it, never has. You thread through the stalls. A man offers you a look at some second-hand shoes, holds them up, not bad shoes, barely broken down at the heel, and you look at them and then look at Nell's feet and do the arithmetic and keep walking because the arithmetic doesn't work out yet. Maybe next week if the boxes go well. Maybe. At the school gate, Nell lets go of your hand. She straightens up slightly in a way you recognise. The transition from the person she is in the court to the person she is in a place with other people. A slight pulling together of herself. A presentation. She has worn the same dress to school all winter, washed on Sundays when there's water to spare, and it's too small now at the wrists, and she knows this, and she has learned to hold her arms slightly bent to disguise it. She knows this at 6 years old. Go in then, you say. She goes. She doesn't look back, which is right. Looking back would cost her something, and she knows the economy of these things better than she should. You watch until she's through the door, which has a teacher standing at it, a young woman with spectacles and a grey dress, and the teacher looks at Nell and says something, and Nell says something back, and there's a small exchange of some kind, easy, almost friendly, and then Nell is inside and you turn back toward the court. The walk back is faster. No market this time. No reason to linger now. What you notice on the way back, what you always notice, is the layers. Whitechapel in the morning light has layers the way the court has smells. Visible layers of life stacked on top of each other. On the main road, Commercial Street, which runs north to south and connects the docks down in Shadwell to the city up toward Aldgate. There is already a press of traffic, carts and wagons, and the occasional cab, horses blowing steam through their nostrils, the iron wheels on the stones making a sound that you feel in your chest as much as hear with your ears. The shop fronts are opening, awnings going out, men with aprons unlocking padlocks on wooden shutters. A coffee stall is doing brisk business at the corner, a little wheeled cart with a brass urn, men standing around it holding cups with both hands, working men, dock men, factory men, men who have been up since before you, which is saying something. Off the main road, the courts. Off every main road, the courts. Dozens of them, running in behind the respectable frontage like the truth behind a polished story. You know several of them now. Thrall Street Court, where the lodging houses are so packed that people sleep in shifts, one group vacating the beds at 6 in the morning so another group can come in and use the same warmth. Flower and Dean Street, where the buildings are so old and rotten that the sanitary board has been threatening demolition for years, and has not yet acted on the threat, because demolition means displacement, and displacement means those people appearing somewhere else, somewhere visible, and visibility is a problem. Fashion Street, where the name is a joke nobody makes because nobody has the energy. You know these places because you've walked them, because in a neighbourhood like this, knowing the geography is a survival skill. You know which houses have fever in them and which don't. You know which landlords are punctual about their repairs and which ones make promises and collect rent and do nothing else. You know which streets have bad patches of pavement after dark where you can turn your ankle if you don't know they're there. You know the dog in the passage behind Wentworth Street that will go for your ankles if you're wearing light-coloured stockings, because it has decided light-coloured stockings are a personal insult. You know all of this. You're 9 years old, and you know the terrain of poverty the way children in other parts of the city know the layout of their gardens. Back in the room, your mother is at the table. She has the boxes in front of her and she's working them. Slowly, but working them. Her hands moving with a muscle memory that doesn't need much from her head anymore. Fold and score and paste, fold and score and paste. And she's arranged everything within reach so she doesn't have to move much. The paste pot, the water cup, the stack of cut paper, all within arm's length. She looks up when you come in, but doesn't stop moving. Ada is still asleep on the bed, one arm thrown out, her face so peaceful it hurts to look at it. "I'll take over," you say. "Sit down and eat something first." Mrs. Price left oatmeal. You look at the pot on the floor near the grate, a small pot with a cloth over it to hold the warmth. Mrs. Price's oatmeal, which she makes with water because everyone makes it with water. Nobody in the court has milk except on the days the milk cart comes and the penny for a pint is available, which is not most days. You eat it standing because that is also a habit, eating standing. It somehow feels less like taking time, less like a cost. It tastes grey. Oatmeal cooked in water with no salt tastes grey, which is technically a colour and not a flavour, but accurately describes the experience. You eat it entirely. You scrape the pot with your finger and eat what's on your finger. Not because you're still hungry, but because leaving anything is a gesture you've lost access to. Then you sit down across from your mother and you pick up the work. Here is what matchbox making does to your fingers over time. The thumbnail used for scoring develops a groove on the outer edge from constant pressure against cardboard edges. The 3 working fingers of the right hand, first 2 in the middle, get a particular callus pattern. Thick pads at the first joint on the inner surface. The webbing between thumb and forefinger on the paste hand cracks in cold weather because the flour paste both wets and dries the skin, and the alternation is harder on it than either condition alone would be. By February you had 2 cracks in that webbing that bled a little every morning when you started work and then scabbed over during the day and then reopened the next morning. You didn't mention this to anyone. There is a particular code in the court about mentioning small injuries, which is that you don't, because acknowledging small injuries invites comparison with the larger ones around you, and there is no bottom to that particular downward comparison. You work beside your mother. The room is nearly quiet. The court outside is at its morning operational noise, footsteps and the tap and a brief argument somewhere. A man's voice raised and a woman's response quick and sharp and then silence again. Inside, just the sound of 2 pair of hands working, the soft crackle of paper being folded, the wet sound of the paste brush, the particular quiet thud of a completed box being placed on the stack. "Mrs. Hollis saw Mr. Catchpole yesterday," your mother says, not looking up. You wait. He's putting the rent up. 6 shillings come April. Something cold moves through your chest that isn't the cold from outside. That's April, you say. April's a month away. You both do the arithmetic simultaneously. You can feel it. The same numbers running through two heads at the same table. 6 shillings means 1 shilling and 6pence more per week. 1 shilling and 6pence per week is roughly half a gross of matchboxes at the rate you're getting paid. Half a gross per week, ongoing, every week, on top of what you're already producing. On top of the 3 gross you're already grinding through. I'll talk to Mrs. Hollis, you say. She knows who else might need. I'm not taking in other people's washing. My chest can't manage that steam. Dr. Sims said. I know what Dr. Sims said. A pause, both pairs of hands still moving. There's the watercress, your mother says carefully, as if the word might break something if said wrong. The watercress. There's a girl in this court, 2 courts over actually, in the passage off Dorset Street, a girl named Eliza Monk who is 14 and looks 20, and has been selling watercress from a basket since she was about your age. You've spoken to her a few times. She has a way of looking at you that is simultaneously assessing and not unkind, the look of someone who has taken your measure and found it adequate, but has seen people your size fail before and is reserving final judgment. She sells watercress out of Farringdon Road Market, starts at 4 in the morning to get the fresh bundles, walks them through the streets calling it out, halfpenny a bunch, and has been doing this long enough to know her regular customers, the ones who come out to their doors specifically for her, the housekeepers in the better streets north of here who want fresh greenery for the table, who deal with Eliza not because they would choose to spend time with a 14-year-old girl from the Dorset Street passage, but because she is reliable, and her cress is always fresh, and that has value. She makes, on a good day, about 1 shilling. On a good day. I can do the cress in the mornings, you say. Before school, 4 to 7, then school, then boxes. You can't do everything. Other children do. That doesn't make it right. You look at her. She's still looking at the boxes. Her hands haven't stopped. You watch her for a moment. The way she works, the efficiency of it, the compression of movement, every gesture serving its purpose with nothing wasted. A woman who has been poor long enough that even her body language is economical. I'll talk to Eliza, you say. She doesn't say yes. She doesn't say no. She keeps folding boxes and says nothing, which in your mother's particular language means yes if you're careful, and no if you're stupid about it. You keep folding. The morning goes like this. Boxes until 9, when Ada wakes and needs feeding, and your mother's cough gets bad enough that she has to stop for a while, pressing the cloth to her mouth, and you take Ada outside because the sound frightens Ada even though Ada has heard it hundreds of times, and you stand in the court with Ada on your hip, her small warm weight against your side, and she grabs your ear and pulls it because she does this, and you let her, and the court goes about its morning business around you. Mrs. Skerritt comes out to beat a rug. The Price children, both of them, run past chasing something you can't identify. A man you don't know comes through the passage from the main road and looks around at the numbers on the doors and knocks on the door of number 9, which is the fuller's place, and stands with his hat in his hands and his face doing something careful. He's probably there about money. Everyone who comes to the court from outside is there about money, either to take it, or because they're owed it, or because they know where it might be found. Old Mr. Farrow, who lives in the room at the far end with his 2 grandchildren since his daughter died of typhoid last year, who spends most of his days sitting on the step outside his door wrapped in an overcoat the colour of old newspapers, is in his usual position. He watches Ada with a kind of neutral attention, the way very old people sometimes watch very young children, recognizing something. "She's growing," he says to you. "Yes. How old now?" "3. 3." He considers this. Fanny was 3 when she first walked into the factory. Over to Limehouse, that was. Pin factory. He shakes his head slowly. Worked there 20 years before the chest took her. He is not saying this to make a point. He is just saying it, the way old people say the things they remember, because remembering is what they have to do with their time now, and you are here to hear it. You know this. You have learned that old Mr. Farrow's stories are not meant to be responded to, only witnessed. Ada pulls your ear again, harder this time. "I know," you tell her. "I know." When the cough settles and your mother is drinking water at the table, you go back in and put Ada down and take up the boxes again. By 11 you have the previous night's deficit recovered, and then some. By noon you are actually ahead. Your hands have warmed up. The cramps have mostly worked themselves out. You have found the rhythm that you fall into when the boxes are going well. A kind of automatism where your hands do the work and your head is somewhere else. Where your head goes, when it goes. A street you saw once near Spitalfields Market. A proper street with proper houses, 3 stories each, window boxes with green plants in them. A cat sitting in one of the windows looking out with the particular dignity of a cat that has never gone hungry. You were there running an errand, collecting something from a woman who made artificial flowers in her front room, and the contrast between that street and your court was so sharp it was almost physical, like a temperature change, like walking from inside to outside. You've thought about that street many times since, not with anger exactly, more with a kind of puzzlement, how far the distance is between that street and this court, and how that distance is measured in units that are not geography. You understand that the city has layers. You are near the bottom of the layers. You understand this not because anyone has explained it to you, but because you have seen the top of the layers often enough to feel the difference in your body when you pass through it. The top of the layers is the man in the black coat who stepped out of a cab on Commercial Street last month and dropped a half-crown in the mud and left it there, either not noticing or not considering it worth stopping for, and you watched this from the pavement on the other side of the road, and then crossed when the traffic allowed and found the half-crown in the mud and held it in your fist the whole way home, and your heart was going so fast you thought something was wrong with you. A half-crown. 2 shillings and 6pence. More than a day's work for you and your mother combined, lost and not missed. You spent it on coal and bread and kept the last 6pence for the boxes in case the paper supply ran short. You told no one where you'd found it. The afternoon opens up a little. Your mother rests, the cough better when she lies down, and Ada sleeps again. Ada sleeps with the serious commitment of a child who has nothing else pressing, and you take the chance to go out, not far, just out of the room, out of the court, up to Commercial Street and along toward Aldgate, in the direction of the warehouse where you take the completed boxes. You don't have a full gross to deliver yet. You're going to look. This is something you do when you can, when the boxes give you an hour. You look at the city. You walk it and you look at it and you store things, the way an animal stores food for winter, except what you're storing is not food but knowledge, information, the texture and logic of a place. You are doing this instinctively, without understanding what you're doing or why. The way a person might do something their survival instincts know to be useful, before their conscious mind has worked out the use. The street on a Thursday afternoon in March has a particular quality. The morning rush is over. The evening rush has not begun. There's a kind of operational lull in which the city does its maintenance work. Carts delivering goods to the shops, a man repainting a sign above a gin palace, up on a ladder with a brush, the word ales in red letters going over the old faded letters beneath, the new bright against the grey. A woman arguing with a fishmonger about the freshness of something she's holding at arm's length, the fishmonger gesturing at his remaining stock as evidence of general quality, the woman unimpressed. You stop at the window of a printer's shop that has a display of illustrations in the window. This printer does a sideline in popular prints and broadsides, the kind sold in the market and posted on walls, and the illustrations in the window change about weekly, new ones appearing as events provide material for them. Right now there are 3. A crude illustration of a fire somewhere in the Midlands, a portrait of someone political, and a full-page illustration from a newspaper, one of the illustrated papers showing a street scene. You look at the street scene. It is drawing of a court. Not your court specifically, but one like it. A dead-end passage with buildings on both sides, and it shows a family sitting on the steps outside their door, a man and a woman and several children, and in the foreground there are a heap of refuse and a drain that is clearly overflowing, and in the background there are other figures that are vague but convey density. Too many people in too small a space. The caption beneath it reads, "Scenes of destitution, the condition of the labouring poor in our great city." You read this, you read it twice, you look at the illustration. The odd thing, looking at it, is how it does not look like your court. It looks like a version of your court as seen by someone who has never been in a court, who has the idea of a court. The proportions are wrong. The children in the illustration look sad in a performed way, their faces arranged into expressions of photogenic misery. Nobody in your court looks like that. The people in your court look tired and busy and occasionally furious, and sometimes they look like nothing at all because looking like something costs energy, and energy is rationed. But it's close enough. It's close enough that you feel a strange doubling, looking at this illustration through the printer's window, like being simultaneously inside a thing and standing at a distance from it, like watching your own hand move. Someone bumps into you from behind, a man not looking where he's going, and he makes a sound of irritation as if you positioned yourself in his path on purpose, and he goes on without apologizing, and you step back to the pavement and walk on. You're looking for Eliza. Eliza Monk is usually in the afternoon at this point, either at the water fountain near the market entrance, her basket on her arm, working the people coming out of the market, or she's at the corner of Fashion Street and the main road, which is a good spot for passing traffic. You try both. She's at the fountain, and she sees you coming from 10 feet away, and does not look pleased. "What?" she says. "I want to talk about the cress." "I haven't got any cress. Morning is cress. Afternoon is something else if there is something else. I mean the morning, the job." She looks at you with the assessing look. "You're 9. "I know. The market starts at 4. "I know. Your mother doesn't want you doing it. She'll come around." Eliza does a complicated thing with her face, sceptical and not entirely dismissive. She has a face that's been out in the weather more than is good for a face, reddened at the cheeks and chapped at the lips, with dark eyes that are surprisingly alert under the general worn-down quality of her appearance, the eyes of someone who is watching everything. "You know the route?" "No, that's why I want to talk. The market's cold at 4 in the morning. Not like your room is cold. I mean properly cold, standing cold. The cold that gets into the standing water in the gutters and makes a skin of ice, and your boots go through it, and the wet gets into the leather. I have boots. What kind? Regular kind. With holes? One, on the right. Stuff it with newspaper. Change the newspaper twice a day when it gets wet through. She looks at you for another moment. 2 days. Come with me 2 days and see if you can manage the early start and the calling without losing your voice and getting back in time. Then we'll talk about regular. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. She shifts the basket on her arm. And if you're going to be working mornings near me, I need to know you won't do anything stupid. What do you mean stupid? Like calling at the wrong houses, like being rude to customers, like putting wet bunches on the bottom to make them heavier. You look at her. Some boys do, she says flatly. Some boys weight the bunches with a bit of wet cloth stuffed in the middle. The customer finds it when they get home, and then they remember your face, and then they're never customers again, and it spreads. One customer talks to another. You lose the route. I wouldn't do that. I know. I'm just telling you. She glances up the road. Monday, 4 in the morning, Farringdon Road. Bring money for the Chris if you have it, but I'll cover if you don't the first time. She walks off before you can say anything else, quickly, with the purposeful stride of someone who is always somewhere to be. You stand at the fountain for a moment. The water in the fountain basin is very clear. A sparrow is sitting on the edge of it, watching you with one eye, tilting its head. Monday morning, 4 o'clock, Farringdon Road. You walk back to the court. What you pass on the way back, what you notice and file. The entrance to one of the lodging houses on Dorset Street. The door standing open in the way of lodging house doors in the late afternoon. The space behind it dim and smelling of bodies and straw and old smoke. A smell that comes out of these places like breath, a living exhalation. A man sleeping on the steps, his hat over his face, his boots worn down to the uppers on the heels and held on with a piece of twine. He is not dead. His chest moves. You know the difference. You have known the difference since you were 7. The Dorset Street lodging houses charge 4p a night for a bed, which is a wooden shelf in a room with other wooden shelves, each shelf with its own blanket. The kind of blanket that, you've been told by people who have used these places, is thick enough to be called a blanket, but smells of everyone who has ever slept under it, and is a reliable source of lice and fleas regardless of the season. 8p gets you a single bed, rather than sharing. A shilling gets you a room with a door. Most people pay 4p. The lodging houses are full every night. There is never a shortage of people who cannot afford the 4 shillings and 6p weekly rent for a room of their own. People moving through the city in the irregular rhythm of seasonal labour and casual work and the spaces between those things. People who were somewhere else last month and will be somewhere else next month and need somewhere to put themselves tonight. Your court, for all its crowding and its cracked walls and its single tap and its overflowing drain, is better than the lodging houses. This is a fact your mother returns to sometimes when the rent crisis is acute. At least it is ours, she says. The room, our things in it, our door. The door matters. Having a door that is yours to close matters in ways that are difficult to quantify but very easy to feel. You get back to find your mother up again, the boxes going again, Ada on the floor playing with a piece of bent wire she has decided is a toy, bending it into shapes and then undoing the shapes and bending them again with absolute concentration. The room is no warmer than it was, but the familiar smell of it, the paper smell of the boxes and the damp smell of the walls and underneath all of it, The particular human smell of 4 people living in 14 by 10 feet is almost comfortable now. Almost a comfort in itself, familiar the way familiar things are familiar, telling you where you are. You sit down, you pick up the work. Your mother asks nothing about where you went. She can see from your face that something happened, that you have something in mind, and she will ask when you're ready to tell her and not before. This is another feature of the compact between you, the unspoken agreement about when to speak and when to wait, a kind of emotional economy that matches the material economy in its precision. Ada brings you the bent wire. House, she says. You look at the wire. Of course. Lovely house. She takes it back and stares at it critically. Needs a door. All houses need a door, you agree? She bends the wire some more. Your hands are on the boxes. Fold, score, fold, paste, press, hold. The rhythm comes back. Your thumbnail finds its groove. The paste, fresh today, is the right consistency, not too thin and not lumped. Your mother has the knack of it better than you do, but you have learned. Outside, the afternoon light is changing. Not that the light ever gets warm in the court, not in March. The angle is wrong, and the buildings are too tall and too close, but it changes quality. The flat grey going towards something slightly golden at the edges, and then quickly fading. Because March afternoons in London's courts don't last. The light goes early, blocked by the very buildings that are keeping out the wind. By 4 o'clock the candles are back on. Thursday evening, boxes until 7, then whatever food can be assembled from the remaining bread and a halfpenny piece of dripping from the shop at the end of the court road, the dripping spread thick, which makes it adequate in the way that adequate things are adequate, better than nothing. Not enough to be satisfied, enough to keep the machine of your body running. Nell comes home from school quiet, the way she gets when something has happened at school that she's working through, and you don't ask. You know that Nell will tell you when she's ready, which usually happens about an hour later, when she's warming her hands at the candle and has processed whatever it was. Tonight it's that a teacher said her handwriting was improving. She said it in front of the whole class, Nell says. Showed my page to everyone. That's good. She said I should practice more at home. You can use the paper from the boxes, the wrong pieces, Nell considers. Would she know it's matchbox paper? She's not going to smell it. This makes Nell smile, a quick small smile that she doesn't quite suppress. And then she's back to being serious. Nell's default mode, 7 going on 40. Your mother smiles too from behind the boxes without looking up. After supper, when Ada's asleep and your mother is resting and Nell is doing a handwriting practice on the smooth side of a cut matchbox piece, you sit by the window. The window faces the court. The court at night is different from the court in the day. The same physical space but with different people in it. The night shift of the court. The men coming back from the pubs and the night workers setting out, and the occasional unclassifiable figure moving through the passage for reasons you don't ask about. The single gas lamp on the wall of the building across from yours, the one that has been there since the summer, that the parish board put up as part of some improvement to this and 3 other courts, gives enough light to see the shapes of things without revealing detail. By the gas lamp 2 men are talking. You can't hear what they're saying. Their breath shows white in the cold. You're thinking about Monday, about the watercress market at 4 in the morning, about what Eliza's route looks like, the street she walks, the houses that have customers, the particular calling voice that carries without being rude about it. Halfpenny a bunch, fresh cress, halfpenny a bunch. The particular inflection that reaches a housemaid opening a door on the 2nd floor without waking the household. You're thinking about money. not in an abstract way, in the extremely concrete way that comes from knowing the precise numbers. 6 shillings rent by April. Boxes at the current rate. Nell's shoes. The coal that needs to come from somewhere. The dispensary doctor who doesn't charge for the consultation, but whose linctus costs 2pence and needs replacing every 2 weeks. These numbers have a physical texture to them, like the cardboard edges of the boxes, like the cold of the water in the jug. They are real objects. You press your thumbnail into the groove it has worn. Monday, 4 in the morning. Nell looks up from her handwriting. Tommy, what? Mrs. Hollis's cat had kittens under her step. Did it? 3, 1 grey and 2 orange ones. All right. Can we have one? No. Ada would like a kitten. We have no food for a kitten. It could eat the bits we don't. We eat the bits we don't want. Nell, no kitten. She goes back to her handwriting after a moment. The grey one is very small. Nell, all right. You watch the 2 men by the gas lamp. One of them laughs, a short, hard laugh. They're still talking. One of them claps the other on the shoulder and then they separate. One going into the building behind the lamp, one walking toward the passage. The court quiets. You go to bed when the candle burns low, lying on the floor next to the wall, because there is more warmth near the wall, or you believe there is, which has the same practical effect, and you pull the piece of sacking over you and listen to the court settling. Mrs. Skerritt upstairs, already asleep, her snoring just audible through the boards, the baby somewhere in the building quiet for once. The distant sound of the main road never entirely silent, the night traffic thinner but not absent. Your hands ache, your thumbnail throbs, your back aches from the hunched position at the table, from leaning over the work, a positioning that is not quite right for a body your size at a table not quite the right height, a slight permanent strain that you have accepted as a condition of being. You close your eyes. Here is what is certain. Tomorrow morning the boxes will need doing. The paste pot will need fresh paste. The paper will need counting. The numbers will be what the numbers are. Your mother will cough, and Nell will need walking to school, and Ada will wake up wondering where her bent wire is. You will do all of this. You will do all of this because it is there to be done and you are here to do it, and because somewhere in the doing of it there is a version of the future where the numbers work out, where the 6 shillings is manageable, where the coal doesn't run out in February, where Nell's shoes have no holes and Ada grows up and your mother's cough settles. You're 9 years old and you're already an economist, already a planner, already a person who lives in the complicated space between what is and what might be possible. The gas lamp makes a faint yellowish glow through the window glass onto the ceiling above you. It looks like a small, improbable warmth. Sleep takes you somewhere between that thought and the next. Saturday is the day you take the completed boxes to the warehouse. Friday was a good day for the boxes, your mother well enough to work the full morning session, and between you the deficit from Wednesday was made up and you had a full gross and a third ready to go, which is more than you usually carry on a Saturday delivery, and means the conversation with the man with the grey moustache, whose name is Mr. Hooper, will be slightly less tense than usual. You carry the boxes in a cloth bag over your shoulder. The bag is heavy for its size, surprisingly heavy. The weight of dense compressed paper in multiples, the weight of 50 or 60 hours of combined work between you and your mother. You carry it carefully, not letting it bang against things, because a dented box is a rejected box. The walk to Bethnal Green Road is 20 minutes through streets that on Saturday morning are doing a different business than weekday mornings. The market stalls fuller, the crowds denser, more women with baskets, more noise. You navigate it. Gate. The trick is the elbows, kept slightly out from the body, not enough to be aggressive, but enough to create a small sphere of space, and the pace, consistent enough to be readable, so that the people coming the other way can predict where you'll be and not run into you. You have learned this. You did not know this 14 months ago. 14 months ago you were run into constantly, bumped and shouldered and apologised at, all of which took time and left you flustered. Now you move through crowds the way the watermen move through river traffic, reading the flow, finding the clear channels. Mr. Hooper's warehouse is a building that smells of wood and paste, and the faint chemical smell of the phosphorus used in the matches themselves, which comes through the wall from the next building where the actual matching happens. The warehouse is where the finished boxes come in and are inspected and paid for. There are usually 4 or 5 children and women here on Saturday mornings, dropping off their week's work, and Hooper moves between them with his scale and his sharp eyes and his particular capacity for finding fault. The woman ahead of you in the queue is older, maybe 40, with a face like something that has been left out in the weather for too long, and she's having a problem with her boxes. Hooper has one open on his desk and is pointing at the join on one corner. Uneven, he's saying. See this? Uneven paste, the join's weak. If these go into the press, they'll split. They won't split, the woman says. She's keeping her voice very controlled, very flat, in the way of someone controlling something that very much wants not to be controlled. My job is to make sure those boxes are fine. I've been making boxes for 11 years. Those boxes are fine. Hooper puts the box down, looks at her, looks at the stack, makes a decision with his face. I'll take them at 3/4 rate. The corners aren't right. 3/4 rate. You calculate without trying to. 3/4 of 2 and 3 pence is 1 and 9 pence. A difference of 6 pence per gross. 6 pence per gross, multiplied by however many gross she has in that bag. The woman's jaw tightens. She does not say anything for a moment. Done, she says. Hooper makes a mark in his book. He doesn't look at her. She takes her money. When she goes, you step up. Hooper looks at you and then at your bag. Briggs. Yes, sir. How many? 1 gross and a third. Checked this morning. He opens the bag, takes out a sample, opens it, looks at the joins. You hold very still. He does this 5 or 6 times, samples from different places in the bag. These are better than last week, he says. Thank you, sir. Still light on the paste on some of the south-facing boxes. See this? He holds it up. You look. The join on one edge is less thick than the other 3. Too light. If the box gets damp in transit, this edge will lift. I'll watch it. See that you do. He puts it down, picks up his pen. 1 gross and a third at rate. He counts out the coins. You count them with him, not obviously. Your eyes not on his hands, but aware of his hands, watching from the side, because undercounting happens, and when it happens, the thing to do is catch it now and not at home later, when the damage is done and you have no recourse. The count is correct. You take the money. 12 pence plus half a shilling and halfpenny on the third of a gross. You put it in the small pocket inside your jacket that your mother sewed there specifically for this purpose. A pocket deep and secure, because Whitechapel on a Saturday morning is not a place to be visibly in possession of a week's wages. Outside, you count the money again, properly this time, in the shelter of the building's wall where no one is watching. 1 and 9 halfpenny, 1 and 9 halfpenny for a week of work. For 93 boxes one night and more the next day, and your mother doing the rest. The 2 of you working around the sleeping children, around the cough, around the cold that slows everything down. 1 and 9 halfpenny. You put the money back in the pocket. You walk. There is a Sunday 2 weeks before April when something happens that you will think about for years after, without entirely knowing what to make of it. It is a Sunday because on Sundays the boxes don't need doing, your mother having decided some time ago that Sunday is the one day the boxes rest. Not from religious conviction particularly, but from the understanding that bodies need one day without the boxes, or the bodies will stop working. Simple machine maintenance. So Sunday mornings you have hours, and on this Sunday you go to the river. You go because of a conversation with old Mr. Farrow, who told you a week ago about the mudlarks, the children and old men who work the Thames at low tide, searching the exposed mud banks for anything sellable, coal washed from barges, nails and bolts, rope, occasionally something stranger, a piece of lost cargo, old coins tumbling up from the river's memory. Farrow did this as a boy, he said, in the 1820s, and he described it in the way he described most things, matter-of-factly, as simply what was there to be done. Children went to the mud when the tide went out. That was how it was. You want to see it. The walk to the river takes 40 minutes from the court, south through Whitechapel to the Tower, then along by the waterfront. The Tower of London is on your left as you come to the river. The old grey walls, the massive bulk of it pressed against the bank, the flagpole at the top with the flag moving in the morning wind. You have walked past it before, but not stopped, not looked properly. This morning you stop and look. It is enormous, inhumanly large for something made by human hands. The walls are maybe 40 feet high and a full London block in length, and the stone is so old it has gone past grey into something else, a colour that isn't quite any colour, the colour of deep time, of centuries of weather. There are soldiers at the gate, bright coats, still enough to look like part of the building. You've learned in school, in the brief patches of school that fit around the boxes and the errands, that this building has been here for 800 years. 800! You try to put that number somewhere in your head and it doesn't fit. 800 years ago there was no court on the back of Commercial Street, no board school on Hanbury Street, no gas lamp in the court. 800 years ago this thing stood here on this bank and people looked up at it the way you're looking up at it now. That's one of those thoughts that starts small and then becomes large very quickly, like the space under the stairs in the dark, like looking at the sky on a clear night and understanding that the sky doesn't end. You look at the tower for 2 more minutes, then walk on. The river smell reaches you before you see the water. It is not a subtle smell. The Thames in 1881 is a river that carries every effluent of a city of 4 million people, the industrial discharge of 1,000 factories, the outflow of storm drains that also carry everything the streets collect, the ballast and waste of the ships that travel it daily, the bodies of animals and occasionally people, the great stink of 1858, when Parliament was forced to close because the smell from the river became so bad that legislators could not breathe in their own chambers, prompted the construction of a great sewer system, Bazalgette's intercepting sewers that run along the embankment and carry the city's waste downriver before discharging it. This has helped significantly. The river is better than it was. It still smells like the river. The smell is rich and dark and complex. A bottom note of something very old below a middle note of mud, and above that a sharp note of chemical that comes from the tanning works and dye works upstream. You breathe through your mouth for the first 30 seconds and then your nose adapts, or rather your brain decides to stop reporting it as noteworthy, and then you can smell the salt underneath everything else, the estuary salt, the sea that starts beginning a few miles east from here. The mud is exposed at low tide for maybe 50 feet on both sides of the river. It is black mud, glossy at the surface, the kind that holds the impression of a boot clearly and then releases it slowly as the weight shifts. There are people on it, 5 or 6 of them visible from where you're standing on the bank. Mostly children, though one is an old man who moves with the permanent stoop of someone who's been doing this for decades, and whose back has accommodated itself to the angle. The children move differently, quicker, crouching and then standing and moving along the line they're searching, their feet moving with careful certainty on mud that would pull at an inexperienced foot. You watch them for a while. A boy about your age comes up the bank carrying something in a piece of cloth. He looks at you with the frank assessment of the professionally suspicious, deciding in a second whether you're competition or irrelevant. "What are you looking for?" you ask. "Coal mostly. Sometimes nails." He glances at the cloth bundle. "Found a bit of copper pipe today, that'll sell." "How much?" "Penny for the coal if it's clean, 3p the copper." He looks at you more carefully. "You want to come down?" "I was thinking about it." "Take your shoes off first. Put them up here. The mud will pull them off your feet if you go in with them." "Isn't it cold?" "Course it's cold. It's always cold." He doesn't say this with particular complaint, just fact. Cold is better than wet boots, though. Wet boots stay wet for days. You take your shoes off and climb down the bank. The mud is cold. The cold goes straight through the soles of your feet, through skin and muscle, and keeps going into the bones. It is a thorough cold, an environmental cold, the cold of something that has been cold for a very long time and is not interested in your comfort. The mud surface is thin and smooth, and underneath it is thick and gripping. Each step you make a small sucking sound, and you feel the resistance as you lift your foot, as if the river is considering keeping you. The smell down here is different, stronger. The river's own close smell, the smell of black mud and old water and whatever has settled into that mud over the years. Small things move in the mud near your feet. You don't look at them too closely. "Go along the bank," the boy says. "Slower sections of the river, the current drops things where the water slows. See that line there, where the colour changes? That's where the tide came up to. Work along that line." You work along the line. It takes about 20 minutes to find anything. A boot scraper bent and rust-coated, which the boy looks at and dismisses. Several unidentifiable scraps of metal that might be iron and might be something else. A bone, which is almost certainly animal, but not certainly enough for you to want to touch it. A bottle intact, dark green glass, which you tuck into your coat because intact glass bottles have a value. Then, in a fold of mud near a post that must have been part of a dock structure once, your toe hits something that doesn't give the way mud gives. You reach down, cold mud above the wrist. You pull the thing up. It is heavy for its size and coated in mud, and is, when you have cleaned enough of it on the side of your coat, a metal object the shape of a small disc with a hole through the centre. Old. Very old. The kind of oldness that is visible in the weight and quality of the thing. Not old like your coat is old, but old like the tower is old, like something that was made when the language of its making was different. The boy looks at it. His face changes slightly. "Where'd you find that?" You show him the fold in the mud. He picks up the disc, turns it over. On one side you can see, through the mud, the ghost of a face in profile, and around the edge letters that are not quite Roman but not quite anything else either. "A coin," he says. "Is it worth something?" Depends. He looks at it. There's a man in Cheapside who buys old coins, takes anything Roman or older. If it's Roman, he'll give you sixpence. If it's something stranger, could be more. He gives it back to you. You hold it. It is small and dense and cold in your palm. 2,000 years old, maybe more. It was in the ground when the tower was new. It was in the ground when the Romans left. It was in this mud while everything else around it was happening, all of history compressing above it, generation over generation, while the coin just stayed where it was. You put it carefully in the inside pocket with the matchbox money. You work the mud for another hour. The river is starting to come back, the tide turning, the exposed bank narrowing incrementally, a quarter inch at a time, and the mudlarks begin to drift up toward the bank as the mud becomes less, and the water begins to reclaim it. Your feet are numb by the time you climb back up. You stamp on the stone bank, trying to drive some feeling back into your toes, and wipe the worst of the mud off on the grass at the top of the bank, and then put your shoes back on. Your feet are so cold the shoes barely feel like they're on your feet, like putting shoes on someone else's feet. The boy whose name you still don't know nods at you as you go, and you nod back. He goes along the bank looking for the next section still exposed. You go back toward the tower. In your pocket, one green glass bottle and one possible Roman coin. The bottle you sell that afternoon to a rag and bone man on Mile End Road for a halfpenny. He looks at it briefly and puts it in his cart without ceremony. The coin you keep. You don't go to Cheapside. Something about the coin makes you want to keep it a while. Not forever. Just a while. Something to hold in the dark when the boxes are ahead of you, and the rent is coming, and the cold is the specific relentless cold of March in a room without coal. Just a thing to hold. Monday morning comes. It arrives at 3:45, which is when Mr. Farrow knocks on your door because you asked him to, and he wakes naturally at that hour, his body having surrendered to the schedule of very old men who sleep less and less, and he does this as a favour and asks nothing in return. You open the door and whisper a thank you, and he nods and goes back to his room. You dress in the dark. Everything gone. Extra layer of newspaper inside your right boot, which is the one with the hole, 2 sheets folded tight, wedged under the front sole where your toes are. This helps. You know it will be wet within the first hour if the streets are wet, but it gives you an hour. The court is absolutely silent at 3:45. Even the baby is quiet. The gas lamp has gone out, whether from timing or exhaustion of gas, and the court is the kind of dark that is almost complete. Only the faint ambient light of a city that never entirely goes dark at its perimeter, enough to see shapes. You go out through the passage to the main road at 3:45 on a Monday morning. It is a different city, not a smaller city exactly, because the scale is the same, the streets the same width, the buildings the same height. But the city at this hour has a different population, a night shift city, the people in it moving differently, more purposefully, with less of the ambient chaos of daytime, because there are fewer of them and each one has somewhere to go. There are carts. More carts than people, actually. The city does its heavy moving at night, when the daytime traffic is gone and the streets can carry the loads without the gridlock of commercial hours. Carts of coal, enormous loads, the horses massive and patient, their breath visible in the cold. Carts of goods from the docks coming north from the waterfront, the drivers bundled up on their boxes, hands tucked inside their coats between checks of the reins. The gas lamps on Commercial Street are still burning, that warm, unreliable yellow, casting circles of light at intervals that leave darker sections between them. You walk through the lit sections and the dark sections alternately, your footsteps the loudest sound in the intervals between traffic. The cold is, as Eliza described it, a different kind of cold from indoor cold. It is not merely the absence of warmth, it is the presence of something active, the wind coming off the river hitting you at the intersections, the stone of the pavement conducting cold up through your boots in a steady transmission. Your face feels tight. Your fingers inside your coat pockets ache at the first and second joints. You walk quickly. Farringdon Road is 1.5 miles from the court, northwest through the city toward Clerkenwell, and you have 45 minutes to get there. The walk is straightforward. West along Commercial Street, across Bishopsgate, through the city, into Farringdon Road. 45 minutes is enough if you move. You move. The city in the small hours has a quality that will never stop being slightly strange to you. The most intense commercial district in the world going about the bare minimum of existence. The streets nearly empty, the great banking and merchant buildings dark and shuttered, their purposes suspended, their money working elsewhere in time zones you can't see. You pass Leadenhall, the massive Victorian market building that during the day is a clamour of meat and game and poultry. The smells of commerce layered over each other until they become simply the smell of Leadenhall. And at 4 a.m. it is a shell of itself. Some overnight traders setting up on the periphery. The building itself still and quiet in a way that seems to belong to a different Leadenhall than the daytime one. Past the Bank of England. You always look at the Bank of England when you pass it. The massive windowless walls that face the street. The building that keeps its workings inside and presents to the exterior world a blank face of massive stone. You've been told that there is enough gold inside that building to weigh as much as several of the buildings on your street. You don't know if this is true. It sounds like the kind of thing that is said about the Bank of England, because the Bank of England needs to be described in terms that communicate its completeness as a concept. It's having gone beyond ordinary financial scale into something more like mythology. You don't think about this for long. You keep walking. Eliza is at the market when you arrive. She's already there, in the way that makes you suspect she arrived a full hour ago and is testing you by having beaten you, her basket on her arm and her face doing its assessing thing. "You're on time," she says. "Yes. The cold doesn't bother you?" "Cold? It bothers me." "Good. People who say the cold doesn't bother them either haven't been cold enough yet or they're lying." She looks you over briefly. "Come on." The watercress market at Farringdon Road at 4 a.m. is a very specific thing. It is not a market in the conventional sense, not stalls and awnings and a social atmosphere. It is a transaction zone, a place where the growers and wholesalers and street sellers meet in the cold grey hours to exchange money for produce, so that the produce can reach householders by 7 a.m. before the day's cooking has started. The watercress comes from the beds in Hertfordshire and Wiltshire mostly, brought down on the overnight trains to the London termini redistributed here. The sellers stand at the entry to the market with their baskets. The buyers come through looking at what's available. There is some conversation, some price discussion, but mostly it's quick. People who know each other, who have done this exchange 100 times before, doing it again with minimum fuss. Eliza goes to a woman with 2 large baskets on a wheeled cart. A woman in a waterproof coat with a red face that has been red her entire adult life from being out in all weathers at all hours. "Morning, Mrs. Crisp," Eliza says. "Eliza." Mrs. Crisp looks at you. "New one? Learning the route?" Mrs. Crisp looks you over with the same rapid assessment that the whole of this world seems to run on. He's small. He'll carry for himself. Mrs. Crisp begins assembling bunches of cress with quick, efficient hands. The cress dark green and glistening with the water it was standing in all night. Cold and fresh. The smell of it sharp and vegetal and surprisingly clean against everything else in the morning air. The bunches tied with a piece of grass, 3 tight bundles together making one saleable unit. "Halfpenny a bunch," Mrs. Crisp says, "or 4 shillings the basket. You want a basket, Eliza, or piecemeal?" "Piecemeal, a dozen bunches. 6pence for 12. 6.5 if you want the freshest from the bottom." Eliza hands over the money without visible emotion. You watch the transaction, watching both the bunches going into the basket and the money going the other way, watching how Eliza checks without appearing to check, the quick count from behind, her eyes on the bunches but her mind doing the accounting. You buy 6 bunches with halfpennies you've saved since Thursday. Mrs. Crisp adds a 7th. "First time," she says, which is the entirety of her explanation. The 7 bunches go into the flat basket Eliza has lent you. Eliza's route starts 2 streets from the market and runs northwest through the better streets of Clerkenwell and into Islington, the houses getting incrementally better as you go, the pavements wider, the window boxes more elaborate, until you are in streets where the doors are painted and the railings are not merely present but painted as well, black and freshly done. The kind of street where the appearance of things is maintained as a matter of course, rather than aspiration. These are the streets that buy watercress. "Walk behind me first," Eliza says. "Watch what I do. Don't call out unless I tell you." She walks. You walk behind her, basket in hand. The calling is what you notice first. It's not a shout, but it isn't ordinary speech either. It's something between the two, pitched to carry up to second-floor windows in early morning without breaking the morning silence entirely. A sound that is loud enough to hear clearly and not so loud as to be an intrusion. Eliza does it like breathing naturally without apparent effort. Watercress, fresh cress, halfpenny a bunch. Pause. Watercress, fresh cress. The second time she says it, a window goes up on the 3rd floor of a house across the street. A woman's head. Nightcap. "2 bunches," the woman calls down. Eliza is already moving to the door. The woman comes down and opens it in a dressing gown, takes the 2 bunches, hands over the penny. The transaction takes 12 seconds. The woman is closing her door before Eliza has turned around. 3 houses down on the left, Eliza says quietly without turning, and you follow. By 6 o'clock you have sold all 7 of your bunches and have watched Eliza sell 9 of her dozen, and know which houses on the first block are customers and which are not, and know the voice and the timing, and have tried it twice yourself when Eliza told you to. Your voice coming out wrong the first time, too high, too tentative, sounding like a child calling in the street rather than a cress seller calling on her route. And Eliza said nothing, just listened. And the second time you tried it again, deeper, more certain, and 2 houses down a door opened. You sold that bunch. 3 halfpence, 3 halfpennies, 6 bunches at halfpenny each, 3 pence. You paid 3 halfpence for them. Profit, a penny and a half. On a day when the route is full and the bunches are more, this scales, not to wealth, not to comfort, but to a penny and a half here and a halfpenny there, and the slow accumulation of small coins that is the arithmetic of survival at the bottom of the Victorian economy, where the margins are so thin that everyone who operates in them needs the calculating mind of a merchant bank with the physical endurance of a dock worker, all packed into the body of a 9-year-old with cracked fingers and newspaper stuffed in his boot. Not bad for the first time, Eliza says, which is as close to a compliment as you expect to get. April comes. The rent goes up to 6 shillings. You tell your mother about the coin on a Sunday, the Roman coin from the river. Take it out and put it on the table between you. She looks at it for a long time without touching it. How old, she says. The boy thought Roman, maybe 2,000 years. She looks at it. What will you do with it? The man in Cheapside might give 6pence, maybe more. She picks it up, turns it, holds it to the window light, which does very little for it, puts it down. That's a very old thing, she says, to have survived that long. In the mud, mostly. Still, she looks at it. I think you should go to Cheapside. You go to Cheapside. The man in Cheapside who buys old coins has a shop that smells of old metal and lamp oil, and the specific dusty dryness of things that have been kept in boxes for a long time. He is a short man with spectacles and the careful, unhurried manner of someone who has decided that patience is a professional asset, and he looks at your coin for a very long time under a magnifying glass, turning it by its edges, tilting it in the light. Roman, he says finally. 2nd century, I'd say. The portrait is Antonine style. Could be Antoninus Pius himself, though the detail is too worn to be certain. Is that worth something? He looks at you over the spectacles. Everything's worth something. It's a question of how much worth. This one, he turns it again, is not exceptional. Common enough type, not particularly fine example, but it's intact, and it came from the river, which tells me it's been in London a very long time. He puts it down on a square of dark cloth. I'll give you 1 and 6 for it. 1 shilling and 6pence. You have learned from the boxes and from Eliza not to accept the first offer. You have learned that the first offer is a conversation starter and not a final statement. The mud makes it more valuable, you say. London provenance, you said yourself. He looks at you with an expression that is very slightly amused. 2 shillings, and that's because I'm in a generous mood this morning. 2 shillings, a day and a half of boxes, 3 pennies of pure profit on top of the watercress root's daily return. You take the money. You do not feel sad about the coin. You did. For a moment, for the walk south from the shop, you feel the absence of it, the absence of the solid, dense weight in your pocket, the absence of that particular cold comfort. But by the time you're back in Whitechapel, the 2 shillings is what it is, which is coal, and coal is warmth, which is your mother's cough not getting worse, which is a future where the numbers continue to work. You buy coal. April passes. May arrives without announcement, just a gradual accumulation of mornings slightly warmer than the previous mornings, the light coming earlier, the court getting its brief daily window of actual sun for longer, the gas lamp on the wall becoming less necessary by about 7:30 instead of 8:30. Small progressions. The biology of a London spring filtering down through the buildings and the courts and the layers of stone and muck to reach you. The watercress is going well. You have your own 6 customers now on Eliza's route, 6 houses that you are responsible for, that Eliza has handed over to you, 6 doors that open when you call. The Thursday house on the 2nd Street is run by a housekeeper named Mrs. Bates, who is, of all your customers, the one you pay most attention to because she sometimes gives you the previous day's bread alongside the pennies, a loaf that is just past its best for the household, but entirely acceptable for purposes where bread is food rather than a statement. You do not mention the bread to anyone. You eat it walking back, quickly, in 2 or 3 minutes, the way you eat everything, standing, not sitting, as if sitting down to eat is a luxury that categorizes you differently than you want to be categorized. School has become intermittent since April. The board school has a requirement for attendance, a requirement that the board inspector enforces with varying degrees of energy depending on the inspector and the week. And when the inspector comes around the court and asks about absences, you say you've been ill, which is a lie you share with most of the children in the court whose work and family circumstances make full attendance theoretical rather than actual. The inspectors know this. The inspectors are not naive. They are people who come from the office of a public board into the reality of Whitechapel and make their notes and go back to the office, and the notes say something, and the office does something, and mostly nothing changes except occasionally someone's parents are fined, which helps no one. Nell goes every day. This is non-negotiable. Nell reads now. Properly reads. Reads anything she can get her hands on, including the weekly report pinned to the board at the school entrance, and the labels on tins in the market stalls and the headings in Mrs. Skerritt's borrowed newspapers. She reads out loud sometimes in the evening, the way a person tests whether a mechanism is working, and your mother listens with an expression that is the closest thing to peace you see on her face in these months. You are listening too. You always are when Nell reads. You read less fluently than Nell, your schooling having been more interrupted, but you read. You read slowly, and you retain what you read with unusual completeness, a kind of photographic quality to your memory for text, which will only become clear to you later when you discover that not everyone's memory works this way. On a Wednesday in the middle of May, the school board inspector comes. He comes not to the school, but to the court. His name is Mr. Gibbs, and he is a young man, younger than you expected, 25 at most, with a good coat and clean boots that have mud on them from the passage, and a clipboard with papers attached by a spring clip. He goes to the first door and knocks, then the next, then yours. Your mother opens the door. She's in the middle of the boxes, so her hands are dusty with dried paste, and she looks at him with the specific expression of someone trying to read a threat level from an official face. Mrs. Briggs? Yes. Thomas Briggs Jr. is on the register at Hanbury Street School. He's been absent. Gibbs consults his papers. On 9 of the last 15 days. He's been unwell, your mother says. And Ellen Briggs, age 6, absent on 3 days. She had a cold. Gibbs makes a note. He does it without evident judgment, just making the note. But the act of noting is its own thing. The fact of being recorded, of being put in a document that goes somewhere and exists in an office. The law requires attendance, Mrs. Briggs. If attendance is not maintained, there's a fine of up to 1 shilling per day's absence, and in cases of persistent non-attendance, we can refer to the school board for London who can... I know what the law requires. Her voice is very level. My son works mornings. He does the cress route and comes back and does the boxes because the boxes are how we pay the rent. If he goes to school at 9 and comes home at 4 and does boxes until 7 in the evening, the box quota doesn't get met. The quota doesn't get met. The rent doesn't get paid. The rent doesn't get paid. We're in the workhouse. She pauses. Is that what the board prefers? Gibbs looks at her. He is young enough that this lands on him. You can see it. The specific expression of someone encountering the actual arithmetic of a situation that they have previously only encountered as an abstraction. The law? I know the law. I'm asking about the preference. He writes something in his notes, a longer note this time. I'll note that the absences are due to family economic necessity. I'll note it in the report. What I'd recommend, Mrs. Briggs, is that where possible, Your son attends at least 4 days a week. The board has more latitude with 4 days than with 5 absences in a fortnight. He goes, picking his way back through the passage, his clean boots not quite clean anymore. Your mother closes the door. She stands with her back against it for a moment. 4 days a week, she says. I can manage that. Move some of the box time to evenings. You're already doing evenings. Later evenings. She looks at you. The complicated expression again. The one that is love and grief and the arithmetic of who you are becoming. 4 days, she says. No less. Yes. You go back to the table. Fold. Score. Fold. Paste. Press. Hold. In the beginning of June, Eliza takes you somewhere you haven't been. She comes to the court on a Thursday morning, not a watercress morning, and says she wants to show you something. She says it in the way she says most things, flatly, as a statement of intended action rather than an invitation, and you go because you have learned that when Eliza says she wants to show you something, it is always worth seeing. She takes you east, further east than you usually go, past Whitechapel Road and into the streets past the hospital, the London Hospital, which is a very large and very grey building that squats on Whitechapel Road, like a statement about mortality. Its entrance attended by people in various states of distress, patients coming and going, a constant low-level traffic of human need passing through its gates. You glance at it as you pass. You've been inside it once when Ada had a fever in January, a long cold night of waiting in a corridor on a bench while a doctor who had been on his feet for 20 hours looked at Ada and said it was an ordinary fever and gave your mother something for it. The building smells of carbolic and something beneath the carbolic that the carbolic is meant to address. Past the hospital, into the streets east of it, toward Mile End. Eliza stops in front of a large building on a side street. Factory building. Brick. Several stories. The kind of building that has no interest in appearance. All function and volume. Designed to hold machinery and the people who operate it. The lower windows are painted over on the inside. There is a smell. The smell is unlike anything in your experience. It is a sweet smell. Initially, they're not sweet. Then something underneath the sweet that is bad in a way that takes a moment to identify. A chemical bad. A bad that doesn't come from ordinary rot but from something produced in a process. The specific smell of a chemical reaction that produces a compound that should not be inside a human body for extended periods. Matchmaking, Eliza says. That's what they do in there. You know about matchmaking in the theoretical way you know about your matchboxes, that the boxes go somewhere and someone puts matches in them and those matches go out into the world. You have not thought very much about the somewhere and the someone. The smell is the phosphorus, Eliza says. White phosphorus, that's what makes the match heads. They dip the sticks in it. The girls in there, girls and boys, young ones mostly, the women are on the dipping, the quick ones on the cutting. What's the problem? With the smell? Eliza looks at you. You know what phossy jaw is? The words land with an unusual quality, phossy jaw. 2 words that don't fully make sense together until the meaning opens up under them. No. It starts in the teeth. The phosphorus gets into the jaw, into the bone. The bone starts to glow, actually glows white-green in the dark. Then it rots. The jaw, the skull, the girls with it, their jaws glow green at night. She pauses. Then they operate, take the jaw. If they don't, the rot goes to the brain. They take the whole jaw? Sometimes. If they catch it early enough, they can take just part of it. She looks at the building. There are girls in there right now. Some of them already have it starting and don't know. or know and can't afford to stop working. You look at the painted windows. Inside right now, girls, probably your age and younger, working with white phosphorus, inhaling the sweet chemical smell, the white phosphorus finding the path into the bone, beginning the slow work that in some of them will end in a green glow in the dark. For a matchbox income. For a matchbox income. You feel something that you don't have a word for yet, that you won't have a word for years, when you learn the word injustice and understand that it has a physical component, a sensation in the chest somewhere between anger and nausea, the body's own recognition of something fundamentally wrong. Why are you showing me this, you ask? Because you make boxes, Eliza says simply. Because I thought you should know what goes in them. She turns and walks back the way you came. You follow. You don't say anything. The smell stays in your nose for an hour after you've left it. Or maybe that's memory rather than smell. Maybe your mind is holding it the way your hands hold the memory of cold water. That evening, doing the boxes, you look at the small things in your hands differently. The rough sandpaper strip pasted to the side. You've never thought about the sandpaper strip. You've thought about the cardboard, the paste, the quality of the fold, whether the join is even, not the sandpaper strip. The sandpaper strip is just there. You think about it now. You keep folding. Summer, July, the heat. The court in summer is a different kind of hard from the court in winter. In winter the hardness is cold and dark and the constriction of too many people in too little space pressing against each other for warmth. In summer the hardness is hot and bright and the same constriction with the smell turned up. The inadequate drainage that works adequately in winter becoming inadequate in summer. The privy that is manageable in January becoming not manageable in August. The tap water that is cold and good in March becoming warm and slightly questionable by July. But the light in summer in the court is a different thing. The sun comes over the buildings by 8 in the morning now and stays until almost 4. A band of direct sunlight sweeping across the yard and people come out into it, genuinely come out and stand in it. The warmth of it on your face a physical event, a luxury that costs nothing and is available to everyone in the court equally. The one resource that the poverty of the court cannot diminish or allocate inequitably. The sun being impervious to the operations of Mr. Catchpole, and his rent increases and his unrepaired crack. Ada loves the sun. Ada has grown, in the 4 months since March, something in Ada has accelerated. The usual acceleration of a child between 3 and 4, and she is taller and more verbal, and has opinions that she expresses with complete assurance. She has developed a friendship with the Price children, the Welsh children from number 3, and they have constructed some ongoing game in the yard that involves specific arrangements of stones, and that Ada will explain at length if given any encouragement, and that you will politely not encourage because the explanation is extremely long. Watching Ada in the summer court, in the sun, playing the stone game with the Price children, is one of the better things. Your mother is better. The summer helps. The cold that was in her chest in March has receded with the warmth, the cough still present but gentler, less productive, the nights easier. Dr. Sim saw her in June and said nothing alarming, which is the closest to good news that a dispensary appointment usually provides. He told her to keep eating if she could afford to eat, which is the medical advice of someone who knows exactly what he's dealing with and is working within constraints that are not medical. The boxes continue. The watercress continues. The rhythm of these two things, the 4 o'clock mornings with Eliza followed by the boxwork afternoons, has become simply the shape of your days, the way the walls of the room are the shape of the room, not chosen but present, the container in which your life happens. You have 10 regular customers now, 10 houses where you're known by face if not by name, where the door opens reliably to your calling, where the exchange of cress for pennies is a small regular transaction in the commerce of their households. In some of these houses you are a person, briefly, in the sense that someone looks at you when you hand over the cress rather than through you. Mrs. Bates still gives the bread. A woman on Rosoman Street, young, with a baby she carries on one arm and pays you with the other, says good morning to you and means it, in the way some people say good morning to everyone, as a habit of fundamental civility, and you say good morning back and mean it too. A penny and a halfpenny a day from the cress on an average day. More on the good days. Combined with the boxes, it is enough. Most weeks it is enough. The coal gets bought, the rent gets paid, the bread is there. Not always enough. Not on the weeks when the boxes run short, or the cress bunches are a bad batch from Mrs. Crisp, or the weather keeps people's doors closed on route mornings, and you come back with half your bunches unsold. Those weeks are the other kind. But mostly enough. Nell is reading better than any child in the court. This is a source of satisfaction so unshowy that it almost escapes attention but doesn't, quite. Mrs. Skerritt upstairs has started bringing her papers down specifically for Nell to read aloud in the evenings, sitting with her hands in her lap and listening in the way people listen to music, and Nell reads them with an increasing command of inflection, giving the news its proper weight, the disasters their due gravity, the court circular its appropriate distance. You listen. You are always listening. August. An event. The event is not what you expect. It doesn't come from outside the court. It comes from inside, from the middle of the court, from the deep middle of a Thursday night when you are asleep after an early watercress morning, asleep hard in the way you sleep after full days, fast and complete. What wakes you is not a sound. It is the smell. You are awake before you are conscious of being awake, sitting up in the dark with your heart moving, and it is the smell that did it. Not a bad smell exactly, not the wrong smells, but a good smell in the wrong context. The smell of burning wood, of fire, and in a building full of people sleeping in rooms with wooden floors and wooden furniture and paper and cloth, and all the material of their lives compressed into the smallest possible space. The smell of fire in the night is a different thing than the smell of fire in a fireplace. You are at the door in 2 steps. The court is lit. Number 7 is on fire. Not hugely, not catastrophically, not yet, but the window of the ground floor room is orange and the window is broken, and smoke is coming out of it in the particular way that smoke comes out of buildings, where there is fire and nowhere for the fire to go, in a concentrated stream aimed upward. The smell out here is much stronger and has the physical quality of heat, even from across the court, a pressure against your face. People are already out. Mrs. Price is out, the Price children gathered behind her. Old Mr. Farrow is on his step with his coat on over his nightshirt. The Fullers are out, the father in his work clothes, the mother with her children. The family from number 7 is out. All of them, the parents and 3 children, standing in the court looking at their window. The father's face is doing something you can't look at directly. You know without being told that they have nothing, that everything they own is in that room, and most of it is burning. The fire takes about 40 minutes to come under control, doused by a combination of the bucket chain that organizes itself from the tap, almost immediately. People you've seen do nothing together now doing something together with a common competence. hand to hand to hand, bucket by bucket, the water going in the window and the smoke thinning and thickening and the fire visible inside doing its work on whatever is feeding it. A straw mattress, a pile of clothes, the paper and wood and cloth. That is the material inventory of a room like every room in the court. By the time the fire brigade arrives, the fire is mostly out. The room is not destroyed. The walls are black, and the floor is damaged, and everything in it that was combustible is gone. But the walls stand. The building stands. The family from number 7 stands in the court in the early morning of the August looking at their room. They have what they are wearing. The court, without discussion, does what courts do. Mrs. Price brings blankets. Mrs. Skerritt brings the family upstairs to her room. Mrs. Hollis, who has more room than most since her husband went to sea last year, and has not been heard from since in a way that suggests he is not coming back, opens her door. Your mother puts tea on, which costs something, and brings it out. The children from number 7 sleep in your room that night, on the floor, wrapped in whatever can be found. 3 children, aged between 2 and 7, who are asleep again within minutes because children who are safe enough and warm enough will sleep regardless of what has happened in the hours before sleep. Ada, woken by the arrivals, curls up between 2 of them without ceremony and goes back to sleep. You lie on your piece of floor and listen to the breathing of 6 children in one small room. In the morning, the court takes collection. Not a large collection, because the court does not have large things to collect. But every door opens and something comes out. Coins, pennies and halfpennies, and the occasional farthing. A pair of shoes, a length of cloth, a spare blanket, a jar of preserved goods someone has been saving. It is not a generous collection in the financial sense. In every other sense, it is the most generous thing you've ever seen, people with almost nothing giving pieces of almost nothing until pieces add up. You give 3 pennies. 3 pennies is an eighth of a week's box income for you. You give it without hesitation, which surprises you slightly, the absence of hesitation. And you think about it afterward and understand that the absence of hesitation is not generosity in any abstract moral sense, but is a practical act based on a practical understanding, which is that in a court like this, the people around you are the only institution that can respond when something burns, not the landlord, not the authorities, not the parish. The people in the court are the resource available, and they become available when needed, and you do the same because someday something will burn for you. This is how it works at the bottom. September. The school board inspector returns. This time, it is not Gibbs the young man, but a different inspector. Older, with the expression of someone who has been doing this work for 20 years, and has learned not to be surprised by anything. He comes to 3 doors in the court, asks his questions, makes his notes. When he comes to yours, your mother tells him that Tommy is attending 4 days a week, as agreed with Mr. Gibbs in May. The inspector looks at his papers. Mr. Gibbs's notes indicate irregular attendance with economic justification. Board's position is 4 days minimum, progress review in January. He makes a mark. The girl? Every day without exception. He looks at Nell, who is standing behind your mother in the doorway with a book in her hand, because of course she is. "What are you reading?" he asks. Nell shows him the cover. It is a battered copy of Nicholas Nickleby, borrowed from Mrs. Skerritt's extraordinary collection of everything ever lent to her and never quite returned. The inspector looks at it, looks at Nell, makes another note. "Keep her attending," he says, and goes to the next door. Nell watches him go and then goes back to reading. In October you turn 10. No one makes a particular event of this. The awareness of it is a private arithmetic, the understanding that another year has passed, that the numbers of the situation are slightly different now than they were a year ago, that you're in a different location on the map of your life without having been able to identify when the movement happened. What has changed? The boxes are easier. Not easier because you do fewer of them, but easier because the body learns, the muscles and joints and tendons accommodating themselves to the demands made of them, until those demands are no longer demands but simply functions, the body doing what the body does. Your hands no longer cramp the way they did. Your thumbnail is calloused now in the specific groove, has been for 6 months, and the groove is permanent enough that you could almost tell your own thumbnail in the dark. What has changed? The watercress route is established enough that Mrs. Crisp at Farringdon Road gives you credit sometimes on the morning when you arrive 3p short of what you need for the bunches. This is trust. In the small commerce of the morning market, being given credit is a form of recognition, a statement that you are a reliable node in the network, that extending you faith is a sensible investment. What has changed? Eliza has taken on a second route in the afternoons, flowers now from Columbia Road Market, and she has suggested carefully that you might come with her twice a week to learn it, and you have agreed, and you are learning it. The flowers are different from the cress, the customers different, the timing different, the selling different, the flowers requiring a different way of presenting them, holding them up so the colour is visible, making the colour work for the sale, learning which arrangements speak to which kinds of doors. This is teaching you something about selling that is separate from the thing itself being sold. You're beginning to understand at 10 years old that selling is mostly about understanding what the person on the other side of the transaction wants to feel about themselves and giving them an efficient path to feeling it. You don't have words for this yet, but you understand it. What has not changed? Your mother's cough. Winter coming again. The cough settling back in. The evenings longer and darker and colder. The coal budget straining against the cold. Dr. Sims sees her in November and is carefully neutral in his expression, which is its own information. You know what the cough means in the long run. You have known since early in the year, since you started paying close attention to the adults in the court and noticing which ones have the cough and which ones have moved from the cough to something quieter, the absence that follows the long, hard months of the cough. Old Mr. Farrow has the cough. Mrs. Hollis's husband had the cough before he went to sea, which is probably why he went to sea, the salt air being said to help, though Mrs. Hollis has had no news of improvement. You know what you know. You do not examine it too closely. The coin you found on the Thames has been gone since the Cheapside visit in April, but you have thought about it again since October in a different way, not about the coin itself, about the mud that held it for 2,000 years, about the capacity of the Thames to preserve things, to hold things, to keep them in its cold, dark, indifferent custody for centuries while everything above it changed, every building rising and falling, every person living and dying, the city transforming from Roman to medieval to Tudor to Georgian to Victorian, all of that enormous churn of human effort and time, while down in the mud of the riverbed things just stayed where they were. There is something useful in this thought, though you're not sure yet how to apply it. In November, something happens that is different in quality from the other things that have happened. Mrs. Hollis comes to your door one evening carrying a piece of paper. "There's a man been round," she says. She hands the paper to your mother. Says he's from a charity. Some foundation, it says on the paper. He was asking about children who work, about what they do in the mornings. Mrs. Price told him about Tommy. I thought you should know before he comes back. Your mother reads the paper. You read it over her shoulder. The paper is from something called the Children's Fund for Industrial Education, and the language on it is the careful, formal language of charitable organisations of the period. Language that wants to be seen as both concerned and practical, that acknowledges the economic necessity of child labour while proposing a path towards something else, something better, a training scheme, an education programme, a way of acquiring a skill that leads towards something that is not the boxes, not the crease route, not the factory work with its phosphorus and its green glowing bones. Your mother reads it twice. He's coming back Friday, Mrs. Hollis says. 9 in the morning, he said. Your mother looks at you. You are 10 years old, standing in the doorway of a 14 by 10 room with paste-dried hands and newspaper in one boot, listening to the sound of a future that might be different from the present, a sound that is barely audible, barely distinguishable from the rest of the city's noise, but that is there. You look at your mother. She folds the paper and puts it on the table. We'll see what he has to say, she says. Then she sits down and picks up the boxes. You sit across from her. Fold, score, fold, paste, press, hold. Friday morning you're there when the man comes. His name is Mr. Alderton, and he is from the charity, as the paper said, a trim man of middle age with a northern accent and the manner of someone who is professionally optimistic, who has decided that practical optimism is more useful than accurate pessimism, and applies this as a philosophy. He drinks the cup of tea your mother makes with visible appreciation, and does not comment on the room or the boxes or the obvious circumstances, which you appreciate as a form of respect. He explains the scheme. The scheme is for children between 9 and 12 who are working in home industries, matchbox making, artificial flower making, hook and eye carding, all the small piecework industries of the East End that absorb children's fingers and hours. The scheme provides 2 afternoons a week at a room in Spitalfields, a proper room with tables, where the children learn things, practical things, reading and writing and arithmetic in the morning session, and then a specific trade skill, a trade that is skilled enough to be worth more than the piecework, carpentry for boys, millinery for girls, though Alderton says the millinery and carpentry are examples, and the programme adapts. The intention, he says, is to provide children with capabilities that increase their earning potential over time, not immediately. We're realistic about the immediate situation, but over 5 to 10 years, the difference between a child who's learned a skilled trade and one who has not. He pauses, choosing his words. It's substantial, in income, in security, in prospects. Your mother asks about the cost. There is no cost. She asks about the days. Tuesday and Thursday afternoons, 2 to 5. He's at school 4 days a week, she says. If Tuesdays and Thursdays he leaves at midday. The school board allows half days for programme participants. We have an arrangement. Alderton produces another paper from his bag. There's a form for the school and one for the board inspector. It's above board. We've done this in 23 courts in Whitechapel and Bethnal Green. Your mother holds the form for a moment. She looks at you. You look at her. The look between you is long and complex and contains everything. The boxes, the crest, the coin in the mud, the 6 shillings rent, the coat that is getting small, the watercress customer on Rosoman Street who says good morning and means it, the school board inspector and his notes, the fire in number 7, old Mr. Farrow on his step, the smell of the match factory and the green glow in the dark, your mother's cough, Nell's handwriting, Ada's bent wire house. All of this in one look. He'll come on Tuesdays, your mother says, and Thursdays, you say. Alderton looks at you, smiles slightly, the kind of smile that is not condescending but is genuinely pleased. The smile of a man who has done this work long enough to know the difference between a child who's being managed into something and a child who is choosing something. Tuesdays and Thursdays, he confirms. Start date is the 14th. He drinks the last of his tea and stands up. He does not make promises. He does not paint pictures of what the future will look like or guarantee outcomes. He gives you a start date and the name of the room in Spitalfields and a list of what to bring, which is nothing, and he leaves. Your mother and you sit at the table. The boxes are there. Does it change the numbers, she asks. Tuesday and Thursday afternoons. I can still do mornings on those days, and the evenings. Is it enough? You calculate. Not for long. The numbers are already in your head. If nothing changes, yes. If the rent goes up again. If the rent goes up again, we'll calculate again. Yes. You pick up the work. She picks up the work. Outside the window, the court is doing its late November business. Grey and purposeful, the people in it moving between their rooms and the tap and the passage with the efficiency of long practice. Two of the Price children are doing something with sticks in the far corner. Old Mr. Farrow is not on his step today, too cold, but the step is there where it always is. The gas lamp on the wall has been fixed this week, the parish board having finally sent someone, and it works properly now instead of flickering, a steady clear light. December. The cold returns with full commitment. The court hunkers down into winter with the resigned competence of a place that has done this before and knows what is required. Coal consumption goes up. Time spent out of doors goes down. The morning watercress calls are quicker, the route compressed, customers taking their bunches through barely opened doors rather than stepping out. The school on Tuesdays and Thursdays. The room in Spitalfields is a proper room, as Alderton said, with actual tables and actual chairs and enough window light that in the late afternoon it is not gloomy, which is not something that can be said for most rooms in Spitalfields generally. There are 12 children in the first session, a range of ages from 8 to 12, from courts and alleys throughout the neighbourhood, most of them doing the same arithmetic as you, attending here because it costs nothing and might lead somewhere. The teacher for the carpentry element is a man named Mr. Quince, who made furniture for 20 years before a problem with his hands made fine work impossible, and who teaches with the compressed patience of a craftsman who understands that skill is built through repetition and not through explanation. He shows you things once completely, and then you do them, and he comes and looks at what you've done and shows you again precisely what is different between what you did and what he showed you. The first thing you make is a joint, a simple mortise and tenon, the most basic connection in carpentry, the way two pieces of wood become one piece of wood. You do it badly the first time. The tenon is too wide and the mortise is not square and the joint is sloppy, visible gaps, no strength. Quince takes it apart and shows you again. You do it better the second time, not good, better. That's the idea, Quince says. You understand immediately that this is a different kind of learning from the boxes, which you learned by repetition of a single simple action. This is cumulative. Each skill built on the previous skill, the earlier one becoming fluent enough to be background while the next one takes conscious attention. Your hands have learned paper and paste, and they are now learning wood and chisel, and the two learnings don't contradict each other. They compound. Hands that have learned how to work learn new working faster. You come back the following Thursday ready to try the joint again. It is better. In January, a Tuesday, Nell comes with you. She's been included because the programme has expanded its age range, and because Alderton saw her reading and decided she belongs in the morning session, the reading and writing component, as much as the skill component. She sits across the table from you with her serious face and learns as she always learns, systematically and completely, one thing after another, each thing given its proper place in the structure she's building. At the break, you walk around the room together. "I like it here," Nell says. "It's warm," you say. "Not just that." She looks at the room, at the tables and the tools and the other children working. It feels like it's going somewhere. You look at her, 6 years old, going on the age she is becoming, which seems to be something larger and more specific than 7. "It is going somewhere," you say. "Where?" "We'll see." She nods, accepting this, not as deflection but as honest uncertainty honestly stated. Nell respects honest uncertainty. She's grown up in a world where pretending certainty is dangerous because certainty has costs, and she's learned to respect the acknowledgement of not yet knowing. You go back to your joint. Winter runs its course. February. The cold peaks and holds, and then, just when you've stopped believing it will, begins to release, degree by degree, morning by morning, the water in the jug not quite frozen by the time you wake up, then not frozen at all, then cold, but not cold, just water. Your mother's cough in February is hard, harder than January. Dr. Sims comes to the room this time, which he doesn't usually do, which tells you something, and he sits with her for a long time and speaks quietly, and writes things in his book and leaves 2 bottles instead of 1. You do not ask what is in the second bottle. You make the boxes. The boxes are a kind of faith, not religious faith, or not only that, but faith in the sense of continued action in the face of uncertain outcome, the daily recommitment to a process, because the process is what you have, and stopping the process doesn't make the outcome better. You make the boxes because the boxes are what stands between your family and the workhouse, and you make them with the same precision and care that you have always made them, even on the days when making them feels like pushing against a wall. Fold, score, fold, paste, press, hold. You're 10 years old, and you're making boxes in the dark before the rest of the court is awake, and your thumbnail fits its groove exactly, and your back holds its angle without complaint, and your hands know the weight of a completed box before they put it on the stack. The muscle memory of 800 days of the same motion, a knowledge that lives in the body rather than the mind. You're also, on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons, making a mortise and tenon joint that is getting better every week. These 2 things are both true at once. The world in which you live is very small, 14 feet by 10 feet, 1 court, the watercress route, the route to the school, the route to Spitalfields. You know this world with a completeness that people who live in larger worlds cannot quite understand, the way knowing a small thing completely is different from knowing a large thing partially, and the world in which you live is also simultaneously enormous. A city of 4.5 million people, an empire that circles the globe, a century in which everything is changing, in which the schools are new and the sewers are new and the railways are new and the gas lamps are new, in which a philanthropist from Manchester can decide that children in Whitechapel courts should learn carpentry and make this decision real, in which the Thames contains Roman coins in its mud from a time before the language you speak existed, in which the match girls will go on strike 6 months from now and win, which you do not know yet, but which is coming, in which everything is both terrible and in motion. In February, on a cold afternoon, coming back from Spitalfields with a joint in your coat pocket that is the best one you've made so far, the two pieces fitting together with almost no gap, almost solid, almost a single piece of wood, you stop at the entrance to the court. The court at 4 o'clock in February, the gas lamp already on, the early dark already settling, Mrs. Price doing her washing in the tub, steam rising from it, the Price children somewhere inside, old Mr. Farrow on his step wrapped in his coat, the family from number 7, the family with the fire, their room repaired now, their door their own again. Ada in the court playing the stone game. She looks up and sees you. "Tommy," she says. "Tommy, look." She holds up the arrangement of stones. "Castle." You look at the stones. They are, if you tilt your head and apply the appropriate generosity of interpretation, a castle. A small one. Probably not defensible, but a castle. "Very good castle," you say. She beams. You go inside. Your mother is at the table, the boxes in front of her, her hands moving. She looks up when you come in. You take the joint out of your coat pocket and put it on the table. She picks it up, turns it in her fingers, pulls it gently to test the fit. It holds. "Good," she says. "Getting better." She puts it down and goes back to the boxes. You sit down across from her. On the table between you, the boxes, the paste pot, the joint. The past, which is the boxes, and something that might be a future, which is the joint, and between there the table where you've been sitting since you were old enough to reach it, the surface worn smooth by thousands of sessions, the grain of the wood visible under the smoothness, the wood's own history running under your hands. You pick up the boxes. Outside, the court makes its evening sounds. Nell will be back from school in 20 minutes. Ada will be in from the stones when it gets dark. The gas lamp makes the window glow. You are not unhappy. Later, Nell reading by the candle, Ada asleep, the boxes done for the day and counted and stacked. You are in bed listening to the city settle into its night. Not fully settled. London never fully settles. But the daytime frequencies going quieter, the lower frequencies rising, the night sounds that are always underneath the day sounds, finely audible. You have the joint in your hand. You hold it in the dark the way you used to hold the coin, the two pieces of wood that are almost one piece, the fit that is almost seamless. The work of 20 Thursday afternoons compressed into this single object, each Thursday's improvement accumulated in the grain and angle of the surfaces. It is not a coin. It was made, not found. It is yours in a different way, a way that has to do with making rather than discovering, with the construction of something where before there was nothing. You think about this. The city outside is dark, most of it. The gas lamps in circles of yellow on the main roads, and nothing in the courts, the darkness in the courts complete. But you know the darkness. You know it the way you know the creak of the third step, the particular sound of Mrs. Skerritt overhead, the exact location of every puddle on the route to Farringdon Road. You know the dark of this city not as threat but as territory, as a place that you navigate daily, that has given up its secrets to you not because you are special, but because you have been here long enough and paid enough attention. You're 10 years old, and you're a citizen of this darkness, not a victim of it, not a tourist, a citizen. The thought settles somewhere in the architecture of who you are becoming. Spring is coming. It always comes. The cold releases its grip degree by degree, and the mornings get lighter earlier, and the court gets its band of sun back by mid-March, and Mrs. Price's tub goes outside earlier in the day, and the stone game can be played again. There will be more boxes. There will be more Cress mornings and more Thursday afternoons in Spitalfields and more conversations with Eliza about route and market and the economics of selling green things in the morning to people who have kitchens. There will be rent increases and crises and the arithmetic problems that have no elegant solutions, only adequate ones. There will be bad things. There are always bad things. You know this now as a permanent condition of the world, not as a sequence of disasters that will end when the last disaster is over, but as a continuous feature, like the cold, like the dark, like the crack in the west wall that Catchpole has still not fixed, and there will be the joint in your hand getting better. And there will be Nell reading getting better, and Ada's castle, which is technically a pile of stones, and Mrs. Bates with her bread, and the warm air from the baker's that reaches 15 feet down the pavement and costs nothing, and the sound of the Thames at low tide, that particular combination of mud and salt and cold water that is the breath of a river older than the city that grew beside it. These things are also permanent features. The candle on the floor is down to nothing. The last light gutters and holds and gutters and goes. In the dark the court sounds, a door closing, soft, a dog somewhere, the distant constancy of the main road, the city's pulse, Nell's breath beside you, slow and even, Ada's warmth near your mother's, the two of them a single small landscape, the joint in your hand, two pieces of wood fitted together in the dark, the fit that you can feel but cannot see. Tomorrow morning, 4 o'clock, the watercress. Tomorrow afternoon, the boxes. Thursday, Spitalfields. And all of it together, all of it at once, the hard particular weight of a life lived at the bottom of a great city, not a life of tragedy, not a life of triumph, but a life fully present, fully inhabited, fully yours. You're 10 years old. You're already, in the ways that matter, a person. The Thames holds its coins in the dark. The city breathes around you. Tomorrow you will wake before the court is awake and step out into the cold and walk to Farringdon Road with newspaper in your boot and your calling voice ready and your basket on your arm. And you will sell watercress to people behind doors that will open for you because you are reliable and your cress is fresh, and that, it turns out, is enough to be known by. It is enough. Let it come. Let sleep find you the way sleep always finds you, eventually, even at the bottom of things, even in the cold rooms, and the difficult arithmetic, and the smell of the river, and the sound of your mother's cough growing quieter. Let the sounds of the court go soft. Let the joint in your hand be just a weight. Let your hands, which have been working since before the light, rest. Let the city hold you, the way the city holds everyone in it, the merchants and the mudlarks, the link boys and the laundresses, the factory girls with their green glowing bones, the old sailors watching the river, all of you part of the same enormous machine, all of you sleeping in the same enormous dark. Some things will change. Everything will change eventually in ways you cannot imagine from here. The courts will be torn down and rebuilt. The rivers will be cleaned. The factories will be regulated. The phosphorus will be banned. But people will still wake before the sun in cities like this one and walk through the cold to get the thing they need to sell and make their calls in morning voices and carry their baskets back lighter than they went out and count the coins and put the coins in the secure pocket and walk home through the waking streets. And children will still fold paper by candlelight, their thumbnails in their grooves, their hands knowing the work before their minds catch up. That doesn't change. The hands that know the work don't change. And you, Thomas Briggs, 10 years old, boy of the boxes and the cress root and the Thursday joint, boy of the 14 by 10 room and the single tap and the court that the people on Commercial Street pass 20 feet from without knowing it exists. You don't change either. Not in the ways that matter. Not in the worn, smooth grain of who you are. Sleep now. You've earned it. Good night.